morning. Happy Harmony Week 2019 and welcome to our debate, Australia's the most successful multicultural country in the world. For those that don't know, my name's Kim Elwood and I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Multicultural Interests, and it's awesome to see you all here today. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I pay my respect to the elders past and present as we have this respectful debate on their land. For those that don't know, the toilets, if you need to excuse yourself, are out in the foyer. In the case of emergency, we have exits to your right. This is the third Office of Multicultural Interests Harmony Week debate, and one that is a very diverse audience today, including schools, colleges, university students, the members of the public, as well as our multicultural advisory group. So thank you for coming today. The date of the 21st of March is the final day of Harmony Week and the United Nations International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination. It's today we pay our respects. Now, it's great to see the schools here today. So when I call your name, the schools, I'd like you to give us a wave, give us a cheer, so we know where you're sitting, all right? We'll see who's the loudest. It's your time your teachers can't tell you off, okay? So you can't be told off. Okay, do we have the Australian Islamic College? Good work. Churchland Senior High. You win by numbers, I think. Dianella Secondary College. Oh! Do you want to try that again? There's only a few of you. Mandurah Baptist College. Oh, good work. Thank you for coming up from Mandurah. And Melville Senior High School. What do you reckon, guys? You get to vote later. This is all right. This is a debate. Also, to let you know, we are live streaming today on Facebook. So if you're telling no one in the audience will be filmed. All the filming's up on stage, but your questions will be filmed. So just want to let you know. I'm really pleased that you're all keen to get involved today, and I hope the conversations that we have today you take back and discuss with your family and your friends and in your classroom. I know a lot of the schools have been having conversations and discussing the topic during the past week, which is fantastic. Following the tragic events in Christchurch, it's more important than ever to come together to discuss the issues of multiculturalism, racism in our community. We've advised most of you that due to last week's event, we've made a decision to change the topic of our debate. This was done out of respect to the victims of the Western Australians who've been deeply and personally affected. Today we're here to discuss some topics, and they're very difficult, and we acknowledge that we must be vigilant and ensure that prejudice and discrimination does not flourish in our society. Importantly, at any point during this conversation, if you all feel uncomfortable, we have a quiet room and seats out in the foyer that you may go out to. Go out, have a little moment to yourself, then feel free to come back and join in. We ask you to treat today's discussion sensitively and respect everyone has different opinions and experiences from those opinions of your own. Before we move on, I'd like to say the Office of Multicultural Interests is delighted to partner with the Western Australian universities who are participating in the debate panel. We have some great debaters out the back getting ready, and our judging panel. Thank you so much. I would now like to welcome Duncan Orr to the stage, who's the Director General of the Department of Local Government, Sport and Culture Industries, to say a few words. Thank you, Duncan.
Thanks, Kim, and welcome everybody, and thank you so much for the schools for participating in today's event. It's a very important topic, and one that I hope every school children in the state is as committed to as obviously you have by coming along today. So congratulations to your schools, to your teachers and to yourselves for coming along. I know you'll get a lot out of this, and please spread the word after this event about what an amazing experience it's been for you. Firstly, I would also like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional owners of the place in which we meet and have this important discussion. And it's fantastic to see my old mate, Phil Wallystack, here today. And Phil, as a proud Whadjuk man, is going to welcome you to country very soon. As Kim said, I'm the Director General of the Department of Local Government, Sports and Cultural Industries, and very proud that part of our department includes the Office of Multicultural Interests. It was interesting because government brought a whole range of agencies together a couple of years ago, and multicultural interest interest at that stage was intended to go to Department of Communities. But I raised the idea of including it in an agency that included local government, which is the part of our government system closest to the community, arts and culture, the absolute importance of multiculturalism in our society, and the enormous enrichment we get from the many different cultures that are living in our communities, and felt that we could energise and give the Office of Multicultural Interests an important role in government, supporting the positive future for Australia. And I'm so delighted that we made that decision, because not only is it's a small group of people who are doing a fantastic job, but more and more importantly, our voice has been heard across so many important issues that have been discussed by the government and by our community. So absolutely delighted that our Minister, the Honourable Paul Papalia, saw fit to put OMI within my department. The Minister would like to be here today. Unfortunately, Parliament's sitting, so he's busy doing his other job. But he did particularly ask if I could come and represent him. I know there's representatives of Said from his office here today, and I know he would love to be here, because the one thing Paul really enjoys is engaging with young people on important topics. As Kim said, this is the final week for Harmony Week, and like Kim expressed, I'd like to express my profound sorrow and condolences for the events that took place at the beginning of Harmony Week last Friday. I don't think I've been so overwhelmed with sadness as I was as the day unfolded and the true horror became evident. It's profoundly moving to me to see the response of the Australian and New Zealand community to this, and the absolute rejection of everything that was implied by that terrible event. It's important we don't get overwhelmed with that, because there is so much more positive in our lives, and if I have anything, I have such great hopes for you, your younger generation, for what you'll be able to achieve as Australians in the future. So I know this is difficult times for you, but please stand hard, stand firm, stand tall, and we will get through this, and it will be a much better nation in the long term from us reconciling. Having been in the arts before I came into government, I had the opportunity to work with many different cultures on arts and cultural projects. And from that, I formed friendships with people all around the world, from Africa to India to China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and continue to enjoy great family friendships. Having the opportunity and the privilege of being able to promote and people's cultural identities, it's very important to me personally. So this theatre was one of the buildings that I did part of my life in. So seeing today's debate take place at Subiaco Theatre Centre just absolutely finishes for me what I know is going to be the beginning of a wonderful day. So thanks very much, enjoy, and I'll hand back to Kim.
Thanks, Duncan, for those wise words, and we are lucky to be in this amazing theatre today. I'd now like to welcome Phil Wally-Stack to the stage to do a welcome to country. Phil was raised in country Western Australia and was taught traditional songs and dance and how to survive the bush by his elders. I'm absolutely honoured to have you here, and it's great to see you again, so I'll welcome you to the stage, please.
Thank you. Kaya, everybody. Yeah, that was all right. Kaya. That's it. You got to bust yourself. Because when you say kaya, when you talk language, no one can tell you to shut up, see? My wife said to me, I said to her last night, I said, what's on tomorrow, hon? She said, you got debate on tomorrow. I thought I was going fishing. And she kept going, you got debate. I was thinking, I got no bait. But going fishing, and it's sort of like, it was funny because I was thinking about that, and then I'm thinking, you're sort of going fishing today as well, because it's so important what you guys are doing. In our language, I'm going to touch back on that, but in my language, we say kaya for hello, as a greeting. We say wanji for welcome. I say nanak janang nunga bojera, nyan mort bojera, korban korbadak nunga bojera. As you look around, you can see the land of the Noongar people. Korbadak korban nunga bojera. It's a beautiful land, it's Noongar country. 1 second. Cameras, man, you got to stop for them cameras. You mob take selfies all the time. We got photographers. So, as you look around, you can see the land of the Wajak people. It's a beautiful country. This country where we are today stretches into my bloodline, my direct bloodline, which goes back to a man called Yalagonga. Yalagonga was, to say, one of the leaders, the leader of this area where we are, this side of the river. Kwabadak nunga bojera. Korban ruran janang nunu nunu jana kule nunga bojera. I said, the good spirit, the creator, look over and keep you safe here today. Mori kulanga mori wanging wa. Ngan court jurban kulanga wanging. My heart is happy that you mob are talking about this topic here today as our future generation, our kulangas, our children. It's very important that you talk about these topics as well. Korban ruran janang nunu nunu jana kule nunu kulakwa. I said, the good spirit, the creator, look over you and keep you safe on your journey from here today. Why my heart is happy that you're talking about this topic today is because too much stuff in Australia has been swept under the carpet. And to the schools here today that are agreed to do this debate, I congratulate you, and you mob are the true leaders of this country. Because I come from a culture and a people that's had a lot of oppression, it's had a lot of discrimination. I don't mind racism because a racist person you can see. Discrimination is the one that I don't like, because that's where you get discriminated and you get things held against you because of who you are and your background, not as much as what you look like. So to the schools here today and the schools who are tuned in online to be a part of this, congratulations, and I thank you, because you mob are the ones who are the true leaders and not turning your blind eye on something that's, devastating. So talk about it. Whatever issues that you have, talk about it. Get it out with the debate, whether it's fishing. Fishing, they reckon you can solve any problem when you go fishing. When you're on social media, you chuck a line out and you always get a bite. And you mob did the same thing today, see? And you got the ugly fish. They took off. They don't want to be part of it. But you mob today with the debate, be honest with each other. Don't sweep nothing under the carpet all your life. Always talk about it, bring it out, no matter what. Because your culture, my old people, they taught me never force culture onto anybody. If you don't understand a different culture, well, it's because you're not a part of it. But respect that culture. Don't try and bring someone else's culture into you. This is Australia, this is Aboriginal country. And we are the most welcoming people on this planet. We don't try to say to people, get off our land, get off here, you don't belong here. We say, welcome, come in, wanju. And we are the traditional owners of this country, Aboriginal people. And we say to you, mob, white fella, black fella, our Islam brothers and sisters, we say, welcome to you, mob. You are welcome here, So on that note, accept each other's culture. Don't try and change one another. If you don't understand a different culture, it doesn't mean that you hate them. And don't remove that word hate when you talk about culture. You got a strong man at the front here, Mr. Duncan Ord, at the top of your mob here. He's probably one of the most multicultural fellas I know. But it starts from the top and it comes right down to you mob, and you mob are going to be at the top. And you are at the top because your decisions and your debates and your movements are the ones that changes the course of the community. So respect one another, don't judge one another, understand and respect each other. Borderline.
Thank you, Phil. That was amazing, and I totally agree with your sentiments. And it's about us having diversity and pushing past that and having inclusion amongst everyone. So thank you. And also, I want to know: did anyone note his didgeridoo? Is that like the sparkliest didgeridoo you've ever seen? Gucci. It's a Gucci. Oh, can I have one of those? Thank you so much, Phil. Now, I would like to introduce you to Mary Chitudi, a speaker, author, and our MC today, and the most amazing woman you'll meet. She is phenomenal. I'm so privileged to have you here today, and I was so excited when I got to meet you today because I've heard so much about you since back in 2011 when she won Miss Africa and was involved. It's just phenomenal to have you here. So I'm going to welcome my MC, and she's going to take us through the day. Thank you.
Oh, no pressure. Goodness me. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Chitudi, and I will be your MC and moderator today. So a little bit about myself. I moved to Perth, Western Australia, June 2003 from South Africa. I am of Xhosa heritage. That's not a mistaken click. That is a real language. A lot of people know more of Zulu, but just between you and me, Xhosa is superior, but you didn't hear that from me. Now, my name is Mary, but my middle name is Sibusisiwe, and my last name is Chitudi. So I actually have a Maltese last name, and I have a traditional Xhosa middle name. So my Maltese Australian father, and my South African mother married in 1987 in South Africa. Their marriage was not legally recognized because a black woman and a white man were not allowed to marry in South Africa at that time. So the issues of racial discrimination ran very deep in my family. Now, obviously, that's no longer the case, but that's why being a part of something like this and a movement forward like this is incredibly important to me. One of the things I also do is, as a speaker, I'm a personal empowerment speaker as a survivor of intergenerational trauma. And thankfully, that opportunity has afforded me the ability to be a contributing author to a book entitled Tales of Courage. So I figured it'd be a great little lesson, just so I'm not talking all the time and get you to all partake. Obviously, Harmony Week is about celebrating all things linguistically diverse, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a linguistic lesson. A lot of the times people hear the name of my language and they'll just sort of start making noises and ask me, did I say something? Did I say something? So, which is not the case at all. So unlike other languages, we don't have a Latin base. We have 3 primary clicks that form the basis of our language. So the letter C is pronounced, can you do that? There you go, that's C. The letter Q is pronounced, there you go. And then X, which forms the first letter of our language, is pronounced, there you go. So Xhosa is spelled Xhosa, and don't be disappointed. There's an anatomical reason as to why how you say it and how I say it won't sound the same. So don't, a lot of people go Xhosa, and you're trying, and that's all that matters. As long as you're trying and you're trying, it's okay, it's fine. Okay, so today, I'm incredibly excited. I've been backstage listening in on some of the debaters rehearsing. Wow, there's some serious change agents, that are here with some pretty amazing opinions. So with that, I'm going to introduce the debate topic, the panel, and the judges. We have 6 panelists in total. So team 1 are for the affirmative. Their debate topic is Australia is the most successful multicultural country in the world today. On that team, we've got Alessandro Silvestri. He did request I say his last name, Silvestri. Matthew Ryan. and Roshani Kayla. On the second team, for the negative, we've got Australia is not the most successful multicultural country in the world. On that team, we've got J. Lee Snowden, Giselle Ishimwe, and Thomas Paparo. On the judging panel, if I can just ask you to put your, just maybe give a little wave. Dr. Justine Dandy from Edith Cowan University. Dr. Yurga Woldayez. Hello, thank you. Dr. Sandra Nasir from Notre Dame University. Thank you. Associate Professor Farida Forza. Thanking you. And Miss Asha Wright from Murdoch University. A thank you as well to our team support who have been working with the panelists to develop their arguments. We've got Sunmi Clyburn, Zara Danishafar, and J.E. Tang. I'm going to go through some of the debate rules, and again, the audience and the discussion will be recorded. Each of the panelists will be getting 4 minutes to present, and the final panelist from each team will be getting 5 minutes to sum up. A bell will indicate when a speaker has 1 minute left. Following the debate, the judging panel will decide the winning team, and the audience, this is where you come in and why it's so important for you to have your listening ears on, because you'll be asked to vote on who you think the winning team should be. So pay close attention. The judges will be scoring the teams on whether they have clear knowledge on the topic area, how well they place the debate in a wider social and political context, as well as demonstrating an awareness of the opposing position on the issue. How well they present a well-structured and clear argument that uses good evidence, how well they demonstrate intellectual flexibility and individually respond to different lines of argument rather than continually re-emphasizing the one point, and whether the speakers are able to think on their feet and rebut the opposing team to reinforce their case. On that note, I'm going to invite Team 1 panelist 1 to present the Team 1 affirmative argument, Alessandro Silvestri.
Australia is the most successful multicultural country in the world. We are here to prove it today because we believe that this is the case. My name is Alessandro, and I will be talking about the socio-economic and legal approaches that Australia has taken to make Australia the most successful multicultural country in the world. Our second speaker, Matthew, he will be talking about the role of media in ensuring and advancing Australia as the most successful multicultural country in the world. And our third speaker, Roshni, she will be mainly rebutting and summarizing our team's arguments. Now, before we get into our points, it is important to give some background definitions. We define multiculturalism as a cohesive social integration, mutual respect, and toleration for people living in society together with different cultures. And also, a small definition of successful, because we believe there is a difference between successful and best. Successful is the progress made in a certain time frame in a specific topic, in this case multiculturalism, whereas best is a subjective judgment on certain indicators on social and economic integration that are too subjective to define in a debate. So moving on to our first point, we believe that Australia is the most successful multicultural country in the world because the legal approach to this integration has been so organic and so embracing of all the different cultures that it has allowed all the cultures to draw from their positives and their strengths to build towards a greater future and prosperity for Australia. In fact, Australia is now a vibrant multicultural country that has home to 270 ancestries, and since 1945, over 7 million people migrated to Australia, and there is a reason for that. Moreover, under the legal aspect of like protection of different cultures, we have the 1975 Racial Discrimination Act that made so that both de jure and de facto discrimination of different cultures would not happen and be tolerated in Australia, which is another example of how the government is pushing for protection and allowing different cultures to embrace themselves in a peaceful environment. Now, it is also important to underline the economic advantages that multiculturalism has brought about for Australia. In fact, it is estimated that over $10 billion are being brought by migrants that come from different environments to Australia. And in the educational field, over $16.3 billion are made for educational purposes by people of different cultures that come to Australia. Our second point is how multiculturalism is good for the country because people are also aware of how multiculturalism has been the key component of the prosperity of Australia. There was a survey in 2015 called the Mapping Social Cohesion Survey, in which 85% of Australians have said that multiculturalism was good for the country. And that also brings all the differences between Australia and other countries, such as, for instance, the United States, because we have an identity that allows different cultures to shape themselves in a way that is respectful and embracing of each other's differences, drawing from the strengths and not being like discriminatory of other cultures. It's just want to conclude a final thought. It's like finding a design flaw, for instance, in a, I don't know, an Audi or a BMW in the European Union and saying that the whole then we have the same flaw. No, we have a different story, and our story is a story of success. This is why Australia is the most successful multicultural country in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandro. Okay, I'm going to now call up panelist number 2 to speak for the negative, J. Lee Snowden.
Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, judges, students and opposition. Kaya, kia ora. Wanju wajak nyunga buja. Hello, hello, welcome to country. My name is Jay. I'm a Koori Māori woman born in Perth. I'd like to introduce my team, Giselle and Tom, Jay and Zara. The first point I'd like to talk about is our history of colonisation and the oppression of our First Nations people, followed by Australia's white-only policy, which sets a building block for societies skewed towards one race. And finally, how our views are influenced by the mass media, leading to hate and fear. A definition of multiculturalism is where various ethnic groups collaborate and enter into a dialogue with one another without having to sacrifice their identities. Despite what you hear today by the affirmative side, please acknowledge that Australia is not the most successful multicultural country in the world. To begin, our nation was illegally colonised by means of genocidal frontier war. There was no treaty, conquest, or ceding of sovereignty by our First Nations people. The Indigenous of this country, my people, are still not recognised today in the Australian Constitution. How can we claim to be the most successful multicultural country when we can't even recognise our First Nations people as true sovereign citizens of this land? In 1901, the Immigration Restriction Act effectively stopped all non-European immigration into the country. This contributed to the continuation of a racially insulated white society. So basically, this has set the tone throughout generations of Australians. People then believed they were being swamped by immigrants, i.e. boat people, and that if they were to come, they would have to assimilate with our way of life. Starting in the 70s, we've seen waves of immigrants coming from different countries: Asians, Latinos, Middle Eastern and African people. Commentators like to say we are a melting pot of combined cultures, but in fact, we are more like a bento box, socially divided and cordoned off into silos. The mass media, consciously and subconsciously, prime our emotions, which leave us susceptible to fear-mongering, moral panic, racism, discrimination, hate, and social divide. So no, these are not signs of a successful multicultural society. In 2015, Australia was the 9th destination of international immigrants, standing after United States of America, Germany, United Kingdom, and Canada. Canada was the first Western English-speaking country to develop multiculturalism as an official national policy in 1971, and Australia came after Canada. The immigration strategies led to 30% of Australian immigrants to come from New Zealand or United States, which are closer in culture to Australia. Australia is also standing after the USA and Canada at the resettlement of refugees. These stats prove that we are not the most successful multicultural country in the world. How can we claim to be the most successful multicultural country when we can't even respect the oldest race in the world? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jay Lee. Okay, next up we have a very keen second speaker for this first team on the affirmative, Mr. Matthew Ryan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In our multicultural Australia, some people say we are not accepting of people from diverse backgrounds. Those people, like our oppositions today, may question the multicultural inclusive backbone that Australia has built itself on since the abolishment of the White Australia policy. Today's debate, in rebuttal to what I've just heard, is about multiculturalism. It is fundamentally not about colonialism. There is a huge difference. Today we're talking about the success of multicultural Australia, and since the abolishment of the White Australia policy, Australia has proven its acceptance of a diverse number of people into its society. Today I will be talking about ways the media promotes multiculturalism and enhances Australia as the most successful multicultural nation in the world. We are fortunate to have ABC and SBS that are our multicultural, multilingual broadcasters over television and radio that support NITV, and this gives people who hail from all corners of the world inclusive information that allows diversity and information for the Australian and Torres Strait Island people as well. The opposite side of the house might say that these are tokenistic efforts, but for a great many Australians, these platforms provide a link to language, culture, spirituality, news, and importantly, connectedness. This enables and promotes a sense of community and social cohesion, ultimately strengthening multiculturalism. The majority of Australians won't be overtly racist, but many individuals do have moments of cultural incompetence or ignorance when interacting with people from diverse backgrounds. The vast majority of Australians believe that multiculturalism has been good for our country. The media is not afraid to call out rampant tribalism of the likes of Fraser Anning, Pauline Hanson and Bob Catter. The media publicly condemns and vilifies these people and makes them accountable for their views in the court of public opinion. Times have changed in Australia. The media is able to expose racist, harmful policies for what they are. If we just cast our minds back to detention and offshore processing in this country, once whistleblowers alerted the media of what was actually happening in those situations, the collective minds of Australia changed. And the majority of Australians who support multiculturalism fundamentally disagree with the way that the treatment of immigration was happening in Australia. Virtually everyone has access to handheld media devices today. I'm sure you've all got one in your pocket or a laptop or something like that. Through this exposure, the larger population of Australians don't want any part of dehumanising racist practices any longer. The majority of new migrants to Australia continually say that they feel a strong sense of belonging to Australia and that they feel that feeling deepens over time. This is in part due to ABC, SBS and NITV. 270 ancestries are represented in Australia. 20% of Australians speak different languages when they go home. We have our religious freedoms abroad and our laws facilitate inclusion. Personally, I think that's pretty great. My side of the house remains optimistic and excited about the fact that Australia is the most successful multicultural nation in the world. We will continue to learn and be inspired by the diverse cultural fabric that makes up a modern multicultural Australia.
Thank you for that, panelist 3, Matthew. Next up, panelist 3 from the negative side, Ms. Giselle Ishmoy, please.
Good morning, everybody. What an exciting debate. I think it's amazing that we're all here just passionately having this discussion. My team was getting pretty excited just hearing everything that you had to say because we were about to go against everything you said. So my 2 key points that I wanted to raise before I guess respond to some of the things that you said. First of all, I don't know how many people in this room who've seen Black Panther. Has anybody seen Black Panther? Yes, Wakanda Forever. I absolutely love that film, and particularly because being an African person, that film connected really, really deeply to my story as an African person. It was almost like telling my story to the world. And the reason why I bring that up is because I feel like representation in the media is so important for people who've come from different cultures. Seeing our stories on television is so important, just because SBS and the other TV stations that you mentioned do make effort to bring this to life. It has not been really reflected in a sense that I don't see African stories, I don't see Aboriginal stories, I don't see Chinese stories, I don't see presenters of these colors when I turn on the television. And for me, that doesn't necessarily show that we are actually making effort to be a successful multicultural country in comparison to other places in the world who've actually made a huge amount of effort to be able to represent other people's stories. And secondly, the reason why I bring up this whole storytelling thing is because we don't know each other's stories, we end up making up different perspectives about each other. And there was the negative perceptions towards cultural diversity and intolerance of specific groups. There's been events that have occurred in the past that show that people don't really understand each other in terms of the Melbourne gangs. I'm sure some of you have heard about it, where people are afraid to go out on the streets because there's African gangs that are ganging up and trying to cause trouble. And part of that is because people are not telling stories of other people. And secondly, I would like to mention the 2009 attacks against Indian students in Melbourne, where these people were attacked because of their heritage, where they come from, which then doesn't really mean that we're a multicultural community. In fact, according to the recent University of New South Wales survey, 54% believe that foreign students under numbers should be limited with support strongest among 18 to 34 years old due to the belief that international students are taking places that would otherwise go to locals. These sort of negative perceptions show that we're not a successful multicultural community because we don't understand each other's stories. Also, 3 in 10 people in Australia do not believe that immigrants make Australia stronger. In fact, with recent events that have happened that are quite sensitive, we had some members of parliament saying some really horrible things that really showed that, people that are supposed to be representing us who are in power are not telling our story in a sense. You know, some of the comments that were made by one of our senators where he was saying that the things that have happened in New Zealand were the reason, were a result of the people that were actually being affected, in comparison to the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who actually stood up to claim these people and said these people who were attacked were our people. And I feel like there's power in that kind of unity where they were recognized and being I guess, being talked about in that kind of way as part of that community. And secondly, what I wanted to talk about was the treatment of immigrants and refugees. We've heard, you know, you talked about the White Australian policy. What we believe in our team is that the White Australian policy has a black history. We cannot move forward and talk about multiculturalism if we don't recognize our story, where we've come from, and what's happened on this land. Otherwise, we're just existing in this space, not knowing who we are and where we're going. But we have to acknowledge the first people of this land. We have to then acknowledge other people who've come in. We have to respect each other. Just because the laws have come in and have actually embraced multiculturalism, it hasn't transcended into reality where we're actually living with each other in respect, loving each other, encouraging each other, and motivating each other. And these are some of our reasons why we believe that multiculturalism has not been very successful in Australia.
Jeez, I didn't realize how short you were. Okay, so with all of that now, I'm going to get the fifth panelist to present a summary. So the third speaker for Team 1, Ms. Roshni Kaler, please.
This morning, the negative team has tried to present to you that Australia is some dystopic society where we all hate people of colour. I think one needs only to look around the room today to see that this is completely not true. I would like to restate what we said at the beginning, that today we are arguing that Australia is the most successful multicultural country in the world, and that we have moved past our incredibly racist and discriminatory history today to bring us here today where we're able to challenge the ideas that the country was built on and able to move forward together as a nation. Now, I'd like to touch on a few key arguments that the other team brought and present our rebuttal and why the affirmative team is the stronger case in today's debate. The negative team today came out by saying Australia has a history of colonisation and that this country was stolen. I would like to reaffirm that today's debate is not about colonisation. If today's debate was about colonisation, I don't think the affirmative team would have an argument. What we are saying today is that today's debate is about multiculturalism, the social integration, the acceptance of different cultures. Though we have a colonised history and that continues to rings true today, what we also see is that we have a national Indigenous television channel. We have native title accepted in our country, which means that groups of Indigenous people are able to operate with their own Indigenous laws and customs. We today, and we see at most public events, we have a welcome or acknowledgement to country, and I think this rings really true to show the acceptance of Indigenous cultures throughout our country. Secondly, on this idea of the White Australia policy, and that Australia has had waves of immigrants, but it's built on this policy that white people, I guess, are superior. What we'd like to say is that we know that Australia has a racist history. However, we've been able to progress so much since then. One needs only look at the reaction to last week's events. Last week's events, which were perpetuated by an Australian man and saw the reaction from an Australian senator, saw widespread vilification of both of these people who are individuals and we publicly recognise are not who represents us today. Every media story that we see is one of us condemning these people, and we only see in Facebook comments, which is where the world's evil is born, where people disagree with this. And this is a fringe and a minority in our country, which we believe lives in every country in the world. New Zealand, Canada, probably more so America, but every country will always have that fringe or minority group of people who are racist, who have these really horrible views that are not based in fact, and we do not think that this is substantially greater in Australia. Now, onto this idea of the influence of the mass media and representation. So we saw the other team talk about fear-mongering and how this exists in our country. And we'd like to say that for the past few years, given the cycles that have happened in our electoral system and the fact that we seem to have a new Prime Minister every day, I do not think that the views of this really small minority of people who have benefited from our electoral system necessarily represent what we believe. One needs only look at offshore detention to see this case. We've seen that since 2001, the government on both sides of the House have brought forward this propaganda that boat people are going to come in and take our jobs and all these other horrible views. However, we've seen, as Matt was saying, we've had whistleblowers in our country that have changed this perception and have brought about a different view, highlighting these stories of refugees. There was a documentary called Chasing Asylum a few years ago in which whistleblowers showed the horrible conditions that exist and that the plight of these people is true and real. This, in and of itself, this grassroots movement against what this government propaganda has fostered as a very important electoral issue in the by-elections that have happened, which have led a minority government to have, and the passage of the Medivac bill. I think this in and of itself, this retaliation and how it's gone from the grassroots all the way up to the highest body in our country, represents that Australians do not fundamentally believe that these people are going to be a threat to our country. Now, on this idea of the lack of media representation and the fact that these people's stories aren't told, we acknowledge that this progress is slow. However, we do not believe that this progress is tokenistic, and we do not believe that this progress is significantly different to other countries. One needs only look at Brooke Boney, a former Triple J news presenter, who now is an entertainment reporter on the Today Show. In her first few weeks there, she was invited and encouraged to speak as an Indigenous woman on her views on the Australia Day debate, on, a show like the Today Show, which historically isn't the best view of multiculturalism, and was encouraged to speak about it, which highlights how important it is that we acknowledge these voices. These voices are coming into the media today, and we are very, very proud to affirm our team's case. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Roshni. And the last speaker for the panelist 5, we've got Thomas Parparo, please.
Now, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd first like to start by reaffirming what we're here to debate today. We're here to debate that Australia is the most successful multicultural society or country in the world. So today, we are certainly willing to agree that Australia is, to an extent, a multicultural society. But to say that we are the most successful multicultural society is just plainly wrong, and it's dangerous to say so. So today, I'm going to be talking about what were really the key points in today's debate. So there were things that this debate came down to that really tells us, is Australia the most successful multicultural society in the world? And let me reaffirm that multiculturalism does not simply mean that we have people of many races, ethnicities, religions, and cultures. That's not simply what it is. We have to have these people accepted, respected, and having the same opportunities that everyone else does in society. So let me first jump on to what the first point of contention in this debate is, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, does our history play a role in how we currently treat multiculturalism in society? And we heard from the affirmative today that no, it doesn't. That we got rid of the White Australia policy and essentially everything's been fine ever since. No, that is fundamentally wrong. Since the abolition of the White Australia policy, we have had a regression and a lessening of laws. So to the point now, laws are equal for everyone, no matter their race, their ethnicity. But we can't simply think that the laws are what goes on in society. Casual racism occurs everywhere, and discrimination is so evident in society, which I'll further go on to address. As I said, we got rid of this flora and fauna policy back in 1967, and that we think that we've moved towards this better state. However, I'm going to talk about the treatment of refugees, as my team has, the racism that we see in politics, the racism that we see in media, and the divisions in society that we have today, which clearly tells us we are not the most successful multicultural society in the world. So then we come to that first question. Are the legal protections in Australia making us the most multicultural country in the world? So yes, we do have a Racial Discrimination Act, but that doesn't mean that racism doesn't occur and that division doesn't occur in society. If you just look at like education in society, compare schools in the western suburbs of Perth, for example, where a majority of students come from a white Australian background, you can't tell me that these elite private schools having such a skewed diversity of students doesn't tell us that there's some lack of opportunity for those who don't come from like a Christian white background in Australia. So there's certainly a difference between like this theoretical what's going on in Australia and the actual practices of what's going on in Australia. And similarly, the fact that we've had 7 million immigrants to Australia since a certain point says nothing to us. We've got to look at how they're actually treated in Australia. So that brings me to my next point about, is the media helping this multiculturalism or does it destroy multiculturalism? Now, I certainly agree. We do have some incredible media organisations like the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and similarly SBS and like NITV. However, these are only a small fraction of the news media we have in Australia, and the viewership of these has been decreasing in years, and so has the funding under the Australian Liberal government in the past years. So fundamentally, we have just this small proportion which promulgates this good multiculturalism. But then we have things like Sky News. We have shock jocks like Alan Jones. We have Andrew Bolt, who they go out on media and promulgate these ideas that aren't about a cohesive multicultural society. And certainly don't tell us that we are the most multicultural society. They create disunity and disharmony in our society. And a great example of that was back in Melbourne regarding Sudanese gangs that were purportedly going around bashing people up. So then finally, I'd just like to clarify what we've told you today. We've told you that we're not the most multicultural society, that there's clear issues that mean that we're not. Our treatment of refugees, our social division, the racism that goes on in Australia, this all tells us that we're not. And a fundamental fact is that studies have shown that more multicultural societies do exist. And primarily tonight, we'd like to say that Canada is a great example of this. And a University of Oldenburg, which is in Germany, study in 2013 did tell us that Canada was the most multicultural society in the world. And we fundamentally agree that similarly with Scandinavian countries, they present a much better model for multiculturalism than we've got in Australia today. So finally, I'd just like to end with the fact that you don't need a debate here today to tell us that Australia is not the most multicultural society. Simply flip on the news. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes our debate section for the morning. I'm going to invite our judging panel to leave the room to go and confer. So if you just give them a round of applause, please, and wish them luck. So we'll be coming to the participatory part of this morning. Just to remind you again, we've got the negative and the affirmative side. So we're going to be doing a roving comment participation on your end. So I'd just like to remind you that to be respectful, we probably will be getting a comment or question and be getting an opinion from either side of the teams as well, just to keep things fair. And can I just ask who has the mics? Oh, those ones. Okay, great. So if you can just put your hand up, and if you have, a comment or question, and each side will respond in kind. Don't be scared.
Good morning, everyone. So I just have a question for the affirmative side. If Australia is the most successful multicultural country in the world, why do we have senators like Pauline Hanson publicly supporting groups like Reclaim Australia, which is anti-Islamic and anti-Semitic, and publicly states that we need to take our land back as the white people? If Australia is so multiculturally successful, why do we still have senators like Fraser Anning publicly claiming that an entire religion is violent in Australia.
We have many views on this. Sorry, is this? Yep, okay, it's working. I would firstly just like to say that Fraser Anning got less than 21st preference votes and got in because another One Nation person resigned and he sort of benefited off that electoral system. And I think we only really need to look at the widespread media response to his comments to see that this is not indicative. The fact that over 1 million people signed a petition saying we do not agree with this and that there's bipartisan support to get him out of Parliament should indicate that Australia does not support those views. I would say also that people like Pauline Hanson, supporting groups like Reclaim Australia, that whole kind of far-right, hyper-nationalist movement that's going on, I guess doesn't really originate from Australia. I think that has come about with the rise of Trumpism and the widespread far-right movement and that sway in politics that has come about due to this rhetoric and this fear-mongering and people using that for political gain, and the fact that social media allows more of a platform for people who buy into that rhetoric to speak has made that a lot wider. But I think that we need to think critically, and the response to last week's events shows that Australians are willing to think critically about those views and respond to them. But I would say that the fact that we don't embrace it completely and that we're willing to debate about it and challenge it is indicative of Australia being a successful multicultural country.
I'd just like to add one thing to that. I would challenge you to find a country where you would not have someone in power that has those kind of views. And I suppose, like Roshni was saying, that's indicative of us being a multicultural society, that you have all these different views that we're able to debate.
Yeah, okay, thank you for your contribution. And also, on top of that, I come from the European Union. Obviously, you can tell from my accent, I'm Italian. And we have the refugee crisis, which has brought about important challenges in Italian politics. And that's why our new Minister of Internal Affairs, Matteo Salvini, is a Pauline Hanson kind of person. And this is to show how the difference between a good and successful multicultural country and a bad one. Because the refugee crisis has shown a lot of flaws in the European Union system, and people like Matteo Salvini, the Pauline Hanson kind of person, had an easy road to victory. Instead here, as the other panelists have shown, Australia as a whole has been able to respond together and with unity to the rise of Islamophobia and all these far-right populist movements. And this is very important, and we think it's one of the roots that underpin a successful multicultural country. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Have we got another question or comment, please?
So I have a question for the affirmative. They were saying that the flora and fauna has been taken out of the Constitution, but why is it that Aboriginal Australians still aren't recognised as the First Nation people in the Constitution?
That is a really poignant and fantastic question. But look, if I'm talking realistically, that really is such a massive question. When you're talking about the 250 nations of Indigenous peoples around the country and having to coordinate all of them into a unified body such that there's able to be treaty, there poses political speed humps, right? But if we look at what the Uluru Statement had to say, now that's a much more progressive way to move forth, and I think Indigenous leadership in this country would like to move forth in that direction. I have no answers for that question. I study behavioural science. Unfortunately, the treatment of Indigenous people in this country has been horrendous. But I'm also looking at this from an optimistic point of view where we can work with the phenomenal leadership within the Indigenous community in this country to work to recognise culture and Indigenous language, spirituality, country more readily. Unfortunately, politics gets in the way, and the Westminster system of Parliament is a huge impediment to having an actual treaty.
Thank you. That was a fantastic question. But I also, I understand the politics, and that has played an important role. But let's just imagine, talk about Victoria, the state of Victoria, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but Victoria has passed a bill that is going to make a treaty with Indigenous communities in Victoria, which is a big step forward. Two states have tried to do it, Victoria and South Australia, but South Australia got lost in the politics, as Matthew was saying, but Victoria has been able to successfully move forward with this treaty, and we're going to be drawing from the New Zealand model, so the Treaty of Waitangi, which has helped many Indigenous communities, many Indigenous individuals. So we understand that politics does play a huge role, but it's also important to underline that there are improvements, and we are moving towards an example of treaty system. And I guess that the rest of Australia will be looking at how this treaty system will be functioning in Victoria, and if it's a good example and with a good, successful outcome, I guess that probably Western Australia and the other states will follow with a similar treaty, and maybe, hopefully, on a federal level the same. Thank you.
I might just get some comments as well from the other end, just so we can have some balanced views. Has anyone got anything that you'd like to contribute to the question that was asked?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Thank you for the question. And of course, as we've said, this is such an important question. It's been brought up all the time in recent years, but I think where this comes down to is like political will. Do the parties have the political will to go ahead and do this? Like, comments were made by particular politicians back when this was brought up that they felt that there were more important things to get on with for the country, like economic building, kind of constructing a nation. But we've got to question, like, is this an important thing? And I totally think it is. I think that to kind of reconcile, and as was said, the Treaty of Waitangi is an incredible model. How we didn't see as much kind of ethnic genocide and kind of division in New Zealand as we did in Australia. And a large part of it was how the Treaty of Waitangi played out, and that there was sort of a peaceful unification of New Zealand between kind of European New Zealanders and Maori New Zealanders. So I think that's the important thing. And as a youth, it's important to think about it, that we're going to be the people who are going to be the voters, who are going to be the politicians, who are going to be the policymakers in the future. So we've got to think that this is kind of the old guard moving out, possibly. And we're the new people who are going to be coming in. So it's going to be up to us as the new generations to make these big decisions.
My comment is actually for the first question that came up, in terms of when you were asking about people in Parliament who are saying all these horrendous things. I read an article this morning about how New Zealand, they had started blocking out websites that were posting things that were inappropriate or sensitive to the people in regards to what happened, which I think is really amazing. But whereas for us in Australia, we've got people on Facebook that are ranting, saying horrible, hateful things. And not just in this incident. I remember even with the Melbourne gangs, the African gangs in Melbourne, when I was like on Facebook reading comments, I literally sat there frozen. I'm like, this is crazy. People like this are on the street and they feel this way about me. So I think there are steps that we can do as a nation, which then disqualifies us to being a successful multicultural society, because we're not taking those steps forward to actually protect the people that we claim to be our people.
Thank you. So just a reminder as well, given the importance of all of these questions and statements that are being made, I implore you, because it is great that we all gather here and have the discussion and start a movement, but everything that's filmed and discussed is also going to be available on the OMI website. So I implore you to share that and help this go viral, so that the people that do need to probably see it do see it. Okay, so we'll move on to more comments on that side. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, and a lot of what the debate came down to was that multiculturalism was sort of the best way to integrate all cultures into society. And I just wanted to talk on the fact that like places like Canada haven't necessarily successfully been able to integrate multiculturalism. And I just put it out to all of you that multiculturalism probably hasn't ever been successfully completed around anywhere in the world. And perhaps that's maybe the reason that it's such a failure, is that humans can't possibly imagine every human wanting to strive to have every culture integrated together. And I just kind of wanted your thoughts on like places where like, you know, there's been a reverse of what there was, like in South Africa, for example, there's like a reverse apartheid occurring, and what you think about those kinds of ideas.
Would the side like to start?
Well, my comment is around the fact that, like you mentioned about the fact that we're the next generation coming in. And I guess it's true that different cultures who hold whatever they believe in so strongly to exist in the same space. But I also believe that over time, because culture is not, it's not static, it's not the same forever. It's something that as we grow and get to know each other and respect each other and learn about each other, there is a sense of where our cultures can intertwine, where we can learn from each other and recreate a brand new national identity, which I think we have an opportunity to do so when, you know, like for myself, if I went back to my country, I can't really relate to the people from there because I haven't grown up like they have. But then at the same time here, I can't really relate to the people here because I haven't grown up here. So over time, I think for the next generation, where they have a common story and a common childhood, things that they can relate together, we have an opportunity to have different people from different backgrounds who look different, who can exist in the same space, still hold some differences, but at the same time still be able to unite and come together and be a country that is successfully loving each other.
The other thing that I want to add is that when a baby is born, he or she cannot understand what is the color, what is the race, what is the ethnicity. So when during his brought up, then he or she is being taught that what is these differences are. And also the other point is that the researchers show that people who are more educated are less racist. This means that if policies and strategies in a society go in a way to teach people how to accept each other, maybe it could be through social media, which a lot of this generation are paying a lot of time there, or through mass media, or through the different programs in schools as well as universities. So people will be more ready to accept this multicultural country. As it was brought up earlier, living together as a culturally diverse country, this doesn't mean that we are following the multiculturalism ideology, which is about accepting and respecting each other and being open-minded. So if the impact of immigration in a country be shown to people who are living there, how many of you know that what our immigrants are doing in this country? And if this country was a monocultural country with all white Australians and Aboriginals, how was Australia different from the Australia that is today? We don't know because nobody told us, and we did not go to research about it. So if people are more educated in terms of how immigrants are helping a country, or what is race, what is ethnicity, why is being bad to be racist, what is the definition of racism, which a lot of people do not know, and unconsciously they're showing some behaviors which is inappropriate. So in this case, you talked about human nature, which people like to be ethnocentric. We like to say that, okay, we are this group, we are the negative group, they are the affirmative group, you are school, we are university students, and so on. So this is human nature, but human nature can be educated because we are humans and we can be educated to think differently. This is why we are called that we are the best, creator of the God. So I think that although that is there, and maybe we cannot eliminate it totally, that is a very ideal word, but at least we can educate ourselves.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. I would definitely agree with what the affirmative team, negative team had just said. Sorry. That yes, it very much is about human nature, that I would argue that all of us are a little bit racist, and that has to do with the fact that that comes from tribalism, that comes from a natural reaction that we have to gravitate towards what we are familiar with what we feel we will be safe with. That's just how our brains function. But as you had said, that we can re-educate, we can challenge those notions and our prejudices, and come together like in a situation like this and just debate different subjects. Whether or not multiculturalism is something that is possible to have completely in one sense, probably not, because we're all very different. We come from different backgrounds, but the basis of all that, of being able to live in some cohesive manner, is to be open enough to listen to everyone else's story and like actually want to empathize and try to understand what the other person is coming from, rather than just looking at our own story. That's the best way that we can probably come together, I would say.
Yeah, I'll just add one little bit to that. The commenter, really nice comment. I think language has plays a huge factor in all of this. And in your comment, you mentioned integration like 3 or 4 times. Integration is fundamentally a horrendous thing in any culture. It implies, just through that word, it implies that there is a minority and there's a majority, and the dominant culture must be adhered to by a minority culture. From behavioural science point of view, we talk about acculturation, which is exactly what our opponents talked about, which is a coming together of cultures to form a better multicultural society. And when you start flipping switches in your brain like that, where you're talking in a much more collective and a much more cohesive and welcoming manner of other people, I think that's when we start. There's no doubt that there's generational issues at play here. There's no doubt that everyone has subtle and overt racisms, and often subtle racisms people are completely unaware of, and they need to be called out. And previously it was mentioned about people on Facebook comments and stuff. And look, I think I would like to be really optimistic in this space and think that the majority of Australians do not agree with a bunch of trolls who are hiding behind computer screens, like overtly being racist and foul to other people in society. Would they say that to other people in society face to face? Of course not. And Australians, I think, collectively condemn those sorts of actions, and it's changing language. It's becoming more of a collective culture where we're able to work together.
They cut him off. Okay. So, as the South African in the room, I feel compelled to probably answer from lived experience on that comment. So the fact of the matter is evolution takes time. Now, when my mother and father got married in 1987, this was during apartheid, so it was an illegal union. Now, my mum's family, so her as a black African woman marrying a Maltese Australian man, boycotted the wedding and wouldn't come. Now, one could look at that as, well, why, the love for their daughter should transcend all, etc. However, this is during a time when people of African ethnicity are being told, based on the color of your skin, you are inferior. Now, that does something on a mental, physical, biological, even a spiritual level, if you will. And it's the emotional wounds, and hence why I am as passionate as I am as talking about intergenerational trauma. It's not as simple as now that apartheid has been illegalized, or we're now one nation, we can flick a switch and say, oh, everything that has happened has been undone. It's not that simple. Now, I do not encourage the retaliation that is happening in some parts, not all, of South Africa as a result of anger, grief, and utter dismay as to how their people were treated, and as a result, oppressing their oppressors. I don't agree with that. However, we do have to recognize that for some people who may not have the education level to recognize that that behavior probably isn't going to serve us moving forward. If you don't know any better, you don't do any better. So the point of being educated, participating in conversations like this, and why it's so important for you to share the link on all of your platforms of social media is when people know better, generally, we hope that they do better. Evolution does take time, and you know, we are moving in the right direction, but it does. It takes time, but you know, it's you know, but it's such a poignant fact that you do point out, and it's great to know that kids your age, you know, that's something, an issue that is relevant in that age group. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay, oh, it's working. Yeah, I might go away from the discussion around Australia for a second, because my background is African American. And so my parents, they were married in 1979, and that was like about 10 years after the abolishment of the Racial Integrity Act there. So my parents would have been illegal as well. They weren't, but it does kind of scare me that it was within that short period of time that when it came to social or ideas in society around interracial marriage was still very much a no-no. But my dad, he went to segregated school. He remembers a time where if he walked down the street and looked at a white woman, he could have been lynched because he lived in North Carolina, which is technically the South. And if we just think for a second what the history of different countries are like to be where they are now, when we are judging whether or not a culture is successfully multicultural. So if you look at countries like America that have had such a history of oppression and slavery, and where they are now and how that everything is being affected. And then if you look at Australia, they had the White Australia policy for much of its history, but it's managed to be reversed much better than the States, for example. Or if you look at any country that's had that idea of national and white supremacy, how multicultural or how accepting are they of other cultures at this point in history? So I think that's an important thing to look at as well.
Okay, any more comments? Mm-hmm.
This question is mainly towards the negative side. You mentioned that Canada is a more successful multicultural country as opposed to Australia. Could you go more into how Canada is more successful, possibly even referring to the study that you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. I think I was the one who brought that up. So yeah, certainly I'll talk about Canada. Well, if we kind of take something, for example, refugees, I think that's a really big question that kind of shows us the value and character of a nation. How do we treat those who come to our shores, whether that be by boat, whether that be by plane, whether that be by foot, coming from violence, desperation, how do we treat them when they ask for help? So if we compare Australia and how Canada's done it. So Australia's in a position where for the last 15 years, and it's only slightly now getting better, we've been in a position where it's been offshore detentions, Manus, Nauru, Christmas Island, some onshore. We tried to have the PNG solution, we've tried to have the Malaysia solution. And a lot of these policies have not been good. This has been arbitrary detention of people, so like children, mums, dads, anyone you can imagine have been locked up in these camps, and the conditions are not good. if we talk about the sexual assault that has occurred in some of these manus camps, not only by fellow refugees there, but also by the guards who are meant to be protecting them. Now compare it to the policies that have occurred under Justin Trudeau's Canada, for example. They've taken a largely higher proportion by refugees per head of population than Australia has. And similarly, the policies enacted have been a lot more about integrating these people in the communities. And I don't mean getting rid of their culture, but I mean we're actually putting them into the communities so that they can live a safe and happy life. And I could go on for a while about this, but I won't. But I think certainly if you look at refugees, just for one example, you can see that Australia has a worse track record than Canada does.
And the other point that I can add to this is if you look at statistics that it's talking about immigration in 2015, 2016, and you see at the proportion of different ethnicities coming as immigrant to Australia versus Canada, as my teammates brought up earlier, almost 30% of Australians immigrants are coming from UK and New Zealand, which is a culture not too different from Australia's culture. So when we are talking about Australian immigrants and the population of immigrants coming here, I think we have to talk about the 17% of the remain, because the 30% are almost the same. But when you look at Canada and this proportion in Canada, you will see that in Canada, I'm talking about 2015, 2016, the latest immigration statistics, you will see that this combination of different races coming to Canada is more different than Australia. So from this point, we can understand that Canada is embracing more different ethnicities within the country. And also the other point is that if you look at the favored destination of immigrants, you will see Canada stands higher than Australia. So we can claim that from these points and some other points that Thomas brought, Canada stands, I'm not saying about the most multicultural country is the ideal world with no drawbacks, no. But if we want to compare some statistics and put it together, we will find that Canada is doing better.
So we probably have time for one more comment, but I just wanted to highlight that Okay, you go first.
Okay, I just wanted to, I don't know if this is on. I can speak loudly, it's okay. I wanted to just respond on that and say that countries like Canada and New Zealand, for example, New Zealand has quite a different history, and I don't know a lot about Canada's history, but I think it is important to look at the framework from which a country is born. Australia is born on a pretty horrendous framework where colonization began with genocide, as opposed to in countries like Canada and New Zealand where they have much better relationships with their Indigenous people. So I think that the main challenge that we're facing today is if we want to look at multiculturalism from two perspectives, where one is, legal acts like a treaty or the Racial Discrimination Act, and sort of more grassroots acculturation or integration, or however we want to respond to it, that Canada's better policies or New Zealand's better policies and stuff stem from the fact that they've got a lot more of a peaceful history behind them, whereas we see today in Australia that because our country was built on conflict and there is this historical notion of white supremacy that's probably more pervasive, that we are on the back foot a little bit. And it's really important to have conversations like this, because the people that represent us sort of do represent those old ideas. And as we're moving forward, we're seeing that this change is occurring, and we feel the need to challenge what has happened in the past. And we feel the need to look to countries like Canada and New Zealand, who were born in a more peaceful manner, and follow their example and be more like them, because we know that that has better results, and we can see that very clearly.
Just on the point we're saying that Canada is higher on the list than Australia when it comes to destinations that immigrants rather go to. I think it's important for us to remember that Australia is a very isolated island country in the southern hemisphere. For a lot of people, if they have the choice, if someone is a refugee from Afghanistan, where are they more likely to go in terms of the distance, in terms of do they already have family there? It's likely that they'll go to countries where the immigration has been more prevalent. So like you'll have the UK, you'll have the States, you'll have Canada, and then Australia later. I would say that there's a good chance that purely for that reason, you would have a higher preference from immigrants to go to certain countries over others.
All righty. So yes, we do have time for probably one more comment or question, but just a reminder as well that the viewpoints that have been taken today for this debate topic, be it for the affirmative or the negative, do not really represent the personal opinions and choices of the participants. So let's just be aware of that. Thank you. All right, one more. Okay, I'm so sorry, but she's just been like, can we pretty please get her? Oh, she has mic. Okay, 1 second.
So if multiculturalism isn't completely perfect at the moment, and if, as the affirmative said, if everyone has a tiny bit of racism, whether it's evident or not, what's going to happen if the world comes across like a worldwide disaster like waters running out or something? Has multiculturalism evolved enough that we can all stick together and go, oh, let's help everyone out? Or are we going to have those prejudices that are going to stop us from basically surviving such a event?
Can I answer your question? Yeah. Does this okay? That's an amazing question. Thank you for bringing that up. And I guess that the best answer that we can have for this is the hope that our legal framework has incorporated multiculturalism enough that our democratic system is able, okay, you're talking about real disasters like water running out, but let's just imagine something a bit less extreme, and I guess that our democratic system is well equipped to deal with these situations in a way that embraces all cultures and respects everyone, not as racist, but as people, just individuals. We don't really need to look at a person's color or anything. It's just, as long as we have democracy that represents everyone, in which everyone has the same weight to choose who they want in parliament or in front of the law, I guess that's where we can find our strength. And I guess that democracy is the answer to your question. And hopefully we will never have to deal with extremes such as water running out. But in case, should it happen, I guess democracy is the answer for it.
Okay, we'll just get a quick opinion from the other side as well.
I guess my answer would be on a very human level. The reason why I think in my comments I really mentioned the importance of storytelling, the importance of us getting to know each other, not just, hey, you're from that culture and I'm from this culture, but actually making the effort to get to know each other. I feel like when we make that human connection and I can see you as an equal, I can see you as someone who has value as I do, it changes the way I would treat you for in an emergency. I would be able to understand that this is affecting you as much as it's affecting me. So I think that's why in this period, we continue to advocate for unity, to learn about each other, to respect each other, to care about each other, so if something like that was to occur, you know that I got your back and you got my back.
Thank you. Thank you all for your amazing comments, and it's truly just so amazing. We have such intelligent, incredibly, politically aware young minds here today, and I think your question probably your question and statement could not be more relevant as it is in the light of the recent tragedy, where you have, people from both New Zealand, Australia, and the world as a whole who have come together against Islamophobia and against white supremacy and said that person does not represent my views, that person does not represent the politician who has a fear-based agenda and is trying to push division. So it's unfortunate, but in times of tragedy, we end up having to let go of that mask that aids in separation, and we all understand that we all one, we all bleed red, and it's been amazing to see how much unity has come on a global front against such a atrocious fear act. So on that, I will invite the judging team to the lectern to deliver their decision.
I was going to say I'm glad that I'm wearing heels today, but they're still not big enough to reach the microphone. Okay. My name's Justine Dandy. I'm from Edith Cowan University, and I'll be representing the judging panel today, and it's my privilege to do so, and for the third time, in fact, and that is actually a wonderful privilege. And I've seen the debate quality and debating style change over those years, and I'm very impressed again with the talent that we've had here today, and I'm reflecting again the judging panel. I want to acknowledge a couple of things that we need to take into account when we consider the debate that's been presented today. First of all, as has already been said, individuals were assigned to their teams. They didn't choose the position necessarily that they got to debate, so we need to remember that they're representing the team position rather than necessarily their personal views. The other thing is that, unfortunately, because we have to go outside and discuss and deliberate, we don't get to hear much of the discussion that's just occurred. And clearly there's been a lot more expanding on the topic and a lot more explanation and discussion, and we haven't heard from you guys, the students in the audience either, so we've missed out on that part and we won't be able to judge on that basis. It is once again, in fact, probably the most difficult one for us to make a decision on. And we were very, very close in awarding the final decision, which I won't share with you yet. I'm going to keep you on tenterhooks for a bit longer. First of all, I wanted to speak about the strengths of what each team presented, and I also want then to talk a little bit about some of the weaknesses, areas that we think could have been done a little bit better. And because we're academics, of course, there's always going to be some criticism in there, critical evaluation. One of the things that I think was really fantastic about the debate today was that it became a debate about what we mean by multiculturalism, and each team engaged with that in different ways. Are we talking about a policy? We didn't talk so much about policy. In fact, in many ways, you guys talked about it as either a demographic reality, that is, we live in a multi-ethnic society with lots of people from different backgrounds, or, and in the case of the negative in particular, is it a kind of reality of harmony and integration and participation and mutual respect? And so that element of the debate we thought was really interesting, the way you touched on that. Are we an inclusive society? Do we respect each other? This was more from the negatives point of view, in that they argued that we don't do this particularly well. How much do we embrace and celebrate the cultures of others? Whereas in many ways the affirmative team engaged with the kind of legitimacy argument, and that is that we have legislation, policy and procedures that protects diversity in a sense. And so that was another kind of aspect to that debate, which I thought was really well done. We also thought it was really good the way you engaged with the colonisation issue. And in fact, we thought the negative did that a little bit better than the affirmative in many ways. Because when we talk about multiculturalism, we should not only be talking about immigration. That's not only what we're talking about in the Australian context. We liked the way that was engaged with, and in particular we liked also the way the ongoing issues, the history of our White Australia policy and other racist initiatives from our past, the way we still live with the legacy of that in many ways. We were also impressed with the debating style in terms of rhetoric and presentation. We thought you were really lively, confident speakers, you spoke really well, you were convincing, and all of that was really, really positive and engaging, and I'm sure contributed to the enjoyment from the audience. I forgot also to acknowledge that you had a late change of topic, and that could have thrown you a little bit as well, which I'll refer to in a minute when I get to some of the weaknesses that we thought were present. There was some use of evidence and data, but we, as academics, once again, felt that you didn't engage with the evidence as much as you could have. There is a lot of research, both within Australia and comparisons internationally, that you could have used, and you kind of brought in a few stats, but you didn't always place them in context. Like if we look at the mapping social cohesion findings, there are some that you could use on one side, but you could actually use some of those findings on the other side of the argument as well. And so a broader argument would have kind of placed that in that context. Also, the international context was a little bit lacking. You did make some comparisons, and I heard then in the discussion with Canada and other nations, but there was less of that in the actual debate, and we felt that kind of, are we the most successful multicultural country in the world, required a bit more about what was going on in the rest of the world. Because there's some good and bad examples elsewhere. So those were some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses. We found it rather difficult, as we always do, to make a decision, and in the end we very, very close, like by only a point or two, went for the negative team as the winner. This again, of course, does not reflect our views on the panel, that we think this is the right conclusion, but it is in terms of the quality of the debate. We felt that the negative team used evidence a little bit better than the affirmative team. We also felt that they particularly engaged with that colonisation issue quite well, and there were many other strengths to that on the negative side, but really it was extremely close. It was really only about a point between it, and we weren't sort of entirely in consensus on that point. We thought you guys were fantastic as well. And just kind of on that note, to wrap it up, the poet, writer and dancer Maya Angelou said, "It's time for parents to teach young children early on that in diversity there is beauty and there is strength." I was thinking about this after the Christchurch incidents, but I'm kind of feeling, as a middle-aged woman now with my glasses on and struggling up the stage, that we don't need to be teaching you guys that. I think the strength that we have here today, the young people that we have here today in terms of the debaters and also in terms of the audience, we can feel very optimistic and hopeful about the future and what is to come. Congratulations to both teams, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you for that. Okay, so for the audience participation, we are going to get a show of hands as to which team the audience thought the winner was. So I'll just remind you again, the affirmative, Australia is the most successful multicultural country in the world today. And the negative, Australia is not the most successful multicultural country in the world. So with a show of hands, please, can I get for the affirmative vote for winning? Okay, yep. Okay, and for the negative, please, can I have a show of hands? Okay, so yep, I guess the audience as well is quite on the side of the negative, so Australia is not the most successful multicultural in the world. I will reiterate that the views that were taken in today's debate do not represent the personal views of any of the panelists, and I thank you all for your great feedback, your participation, and it truly is something to be behold from young minds. I did think this would be a look under your seats moment, but it's not. There are some feedback forms that have been handed out. It's imperative, like I keep saying, when we know better, we do better. So if you can please fill out these feedback forms, just so we know the things that we're doing amazing. We know the things that we can probably improve on, and obviously as the years go on, we'd like to run this event as best as possible. I'd like to us to please give a hand to our judging panel and thank them for their time this morning. I'd like us to please give a hand to the panelists this morning as well. They're forming really great arguments. Yes, thank you. All of our guests, our political representatives, everyone who's come in today. For the Office of Multicultural Interests, I thank you for holding such an amazing inaugural event, and I look forward to a time when Harmony Week is every week. And a round of applause for all of you as well, please, for partaking. Okay, as I mentioned before, this debate and the discussion will be, the recording of it will be found on the omi.wa.gov.au website. I implore you to please go on there, share it amongst your social networks. The people that probably need to see it the most are the ones that aren't in this room right now. So I implore you to do that. Please fill in your forms and hand them in. We really need those from you guys. Thank you all. My name is Mary Chidguti. I've been your moderator for today. Anything else that the OMI team would like me to add before I sign off? No? All right. So I implore you moving forward that we take the lessons of our past as exactly that, lessons in moving forward. It's not always easy, but staying solution-focused as to what we can do moving forward. Hearing some of the comments today, hearing some of the arguments that were made, truly is encouraging moving forward. So thank you all. Have a great rest of Harmony Week.